Market exchange generally benefits all parties. The prospect of exchange also encourages people to develop natural resources into goods that other people want and are willing to trade for. Market efficiency occurs when resources are put to their most productive use and when all gains from trade are exhausted. Market failure happens whenever resources are allocated inefficiently. While market efficiency is widely considered a goal worth pursuing, efficiency is a purely hypothetical standard, since free people will always invent new uses for resources and new products that others are willing to trade for. Francis Bator, who coined the term market failure, meant it to indicate conditions in which, in principle, governments might intervene in markets to improve efficiency. There are a few main sources of market failure. One source is externalities, which are effects of a transaction on third parties. Externalities can be positive or negative. In the case of a negative externality, a market transaction has led to an outcome that clearly harms third parties in ways they couldn't consent to. To take a simple example, when I sell you a bottle of cologne that you wear to work, those around you who like the smell get a positive externality, a benefit they didn't pay for, and those who hate the smell incur a negative externality, a cost they didn't ask for. A more serious case is pollution. In the 1970s, gasoline often contained lead, and those who breathed smoggy air were more susceptible to cancer. Negative externalities leave some people worse off than they would have been had the exchange not occurred. It's a little harder to see why positive externalities might be inefficient. But think of it this way. When I can charge for a benefit, I tend to produce more goods that people want. If I can't charge, I'll tend to produce fewer. Consider jokes. At a party, many people might overhear Jerry Seinfeld tell a great joke. This is a positive externality. Of course, people often tell jokes for fun rather than profit. But think about what happens when people can charge money for jokes. Comedy writers can devote their energy to writing jokes for a living, and stand-up comics can take their talents on the road. When a joke teller can charge an audience who will happily pay to listen, his jokes are no longer a positive externality. We would say that he has internalized the cost of the externality, since the audience is now paying for the jokes they benefit from hearing. This allows the comedian to devote more time to his craft, and we tend to get more and better jokes as a result. To solve negative externalities, we also have to find a way for the person inflicting the externality to internalize the cost. For example, a polluter could be forced to pay a tax to offset the harms he currently imposes on others. This forces the polluter to pay the full social cost of his activities, but it also means that when faced with this cost, he'll search for new ways to reduce pollution. Another kind of market failure economists talk about are market failures to provide public goods. Public goods have two features, non-rivalry and non-excludability. Non-rivalry means that if I consume the good, there's plenty left for others to consume. Non-excludability, on the other hand, means that once I produce the good, there's no way to exclude anyone from enjoying it. For example, if the US creates a missile defense system to protect planet Earth from asteroids, this is a public good, since if anyone benefits, everyone does. And no matter how many people are living on Earth, we all enjoy the benefits equally. While technically a good is just anything that can be used to satisfy a desire, in most cases of public goods, we're talking about goods that actually benefit people. For this reason, public goods can be thought of as non-excludable positive externalities, and they pose efficiency problems for the same reasons externalities do. If an outcome that benefits many people is costly to produce, and there is no way to exclude beneficiaries from using it, some people will be tempted to free ride on the efforts of others. Knowing about the free rider problem, even those of us willing to do our fair share to produce the public good may hold back, since we lack the assurance that enough others will contribute to make our effort worthwhile. This means, at least in theory, that public goods tend to be underproduced unless the government steps in and either produces or subsidizes them. For example, people in many countries free ride on the deterrence that the US military provides against rogue regimes that would otherwise invade neighboring countries. Many also free ride on basic science research done in the US and UK. Everyone on Earth benefits from new vaccines and antibiotics and new technology that requires basic science research. But most people around the world don't pay for it. In fact, that's the point of the National Science Foundation and the US Center for Disease Control. They're tasked with using taxpayer money to finance basic science research from which everyone benefits, but which nobody can be prevented from using. Since companies can't patent discoveries about how the world works, and since private firms are run by people with relatively short time horizons, researchers often rely on private donors and government agencies to finance their efforts. Of course, there's a downside. Some of the research government agencies finance is without value, and some is politically biased and even socially harmful. This leads to an important point. While markets tend to underprovide public goods, governments often overprovide them. We always need to compare the imperfections of markets with those of politics before we move from the observation that markets are inefficient to the conclusion that governments ought to play a role in reallocating resources to fix the inefficiency. In this case, while some basic science research is funded by private individuals, many economists believe governments might play a positive role by subsidizing the production of the public good of new research. The take-home lesson here is that it's one thing for an economist in an armchair to think about how resources might be more efficiently allocated, and quite another for government agents to achieve a more efficient allocation of resources. After all, government agents have imperfect information, and they're often motivated to act in ways that benefit their friends and punish their enemies. To the extent that voters in large democracies tend to be poorly informed, there's no guarantee that democratic processes will predictably give us policies that improve on the imperfections of the market. Entrepreneurs, on the other hand, generally have an incentive to figure out what customers want and how to provide it as cheaply as possible. Their goal is to make money, their customers' goal is to get a good deal, and everyone is generally better off. While some public goods are best supplied by governments, we should also pay attention to the inefficiencies they can create by attempting to fix market failures.